All right, welcome. This is Anthony Patch. This is the Anthony Patch Show. And my good friend Kev Baker is with me again this evening. I always appreciate Kev pulling this thing together. We have to hold the wings on this aircraft. I don't know how he does it while wearing a parachute. But as always, he's assumed his jump position at the side door just in case things go awry. But my friend, how are you this evening over on the other side of the pond?
I'm doing very well indeed, sir. It's quite apt, this kind of description you've got on with me with the parachute and things like that. Because as you know, I've kind of had to rethink my YouTube strategy, Tony, and I'm going to be doing a lot more gaming and talking about the issues we talk about throughout the games over there. And the game I play, you'll never guess what, I'm actually strapped to the side of a plane and I parachute in to an island at the start of every round. So quite apt that months ago you started saying I was your man, your wingman with the parachute at the ready. Here I am today. Again, future effect in the past, Tony. You didn't know why you described me as that, but now it's explanatory now.
It's prophetic. That's all we can say, right?
Well, it's definitely, maybe when you're looking for these synchronicities, you maybe put two and two together sometimes and come up with things that maybe aren't. But with the entanglement that we've got, I definitely see a lot more things going on than I used to.
Well, we take it in stride. It happens so much between you and I. There's another person that I'm entangled with, and that's by marriage. And you guys in the audience, you ladies and gentlemen who've joined us this evening so graciously, you know her as Kathleen Urquhart. She is my bride. And she is our guest this evening. We're going to talk about Kathleen's new book that just launched today. So you are the first audience. This is an exclusive. And we are going to speak with Kathleen after this first segment. Kev and I are going to go over a little bit of the news that's happened this week. I'm going to give thanks to my patrons by name. And then after the first break in the show, we'll bring Kathleen on. And we will spend the entire show from that point forward going over her book entitled Pigtails and Potter's Field, a truly intriguing title for a book. And I'll give you a little sidebar, a little backstory. If you look at the cover of her book, and we'll be posting in chat for the folks that in chat that join us every week, and they will have the privilege of seeing the graphics we have for this evening and also the links that we'll be providing. But we also have her website available, and you'll be able to see this if you're not in chat. But one of the photographs that she chose is a place that I used to take my daughters to in Oregon, right near Portland, Oregon. And that is called Cannon Beach. And it's named Cannon Beach because an old cannon from an old Spanish galleon turned up there one time after a storm when the sands were washed away. But more importantly, there's a landmark. There's a rock formation right in the shore, right where the breakers are. And it's known as Haystack Rock. And it's a great place for going into where the tide pools are at low tide and viewing the multicolored starfish. So I found it very interesting, Kev. We talk about the synchronicities, but when Kathleen first showed me the cover of her book and the artwork and then showed it to me on her website, I went, oh, that's Haystack Rock. I know that. Play it, we've been there many, many times. So that's on the west coast of the United States, and she's on the east coast of the United States. If you look at the thumbnail that Kev put together, the beautiful artwork that he just posted in the chat room, just absolutely beautiful font work. But in the background is Haystack Rock. If you want to Google that, Google Haystack Rock, Oregon coast, and you'll see it pop up. It's a very famous landmark. But just an extraordinary piece of work that you've put together, Kevin. I just wanted to thank you for that, as you do for Entangled Magazine. Every cover you have produced for me with your artistic talent. So thank you, my friend.
No, I do enjoy being unleashed on the Photoshop, and that scenery there, Anthony, I mean, it's very, very striking. It was really easy to kind of add some text to that to make it look nice and kind of snazzy. But again, this kind of entanglement, there Kathleen is on the opposite coast of the US from you, yet she chose randomly an image that was something that you could absolutely relate to. So it doesn't surprise me anymore that these things happen. What does surprise me, or what does shock me, though, is maybe the synchronicities and the entanglements that we miss along the way. You know, I'm sure all of these kind of little signs, these little pointers are around us all throughout our lives. And I just wonder how many of them we just pick up on. You know, we've only really recognized all these things recently, Anthony. But I wonder how many other synchronicities out there, because we are all entangled.
We are, and there's nothing new age. You know, I have read some posts by people who've been critical of talking about quantum physics and in particular quantum entanglement and saying that it is all made up, that it is all, theoretical. And yet quantum entanglement itself has been proven in the laboratory over and over again, even to the extent of being able to, as we've covered the Chinese accomplishment, of quantum entangled communications from the ground-based transmitting site using a quantum computer to an orbiting satellite. So, you know, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, there are certain aspects of it that are truly so theoretical and so full of conjecture that I, as someone who studies that, can certainly see where the layperson would say, boy, you know, this whole quantum mechanics thing is, you know, just a bunch of hooey. It's all been made up. It's just, people justifying their research. And I can understand that. I get where they're coming from. But there are aspects of quantum mechanics, and in particular with quantum entanglement and quantum computing, that are very much provable. They are empirical. They are repeatable. They are measurable. So they move from the theoretical to the, let's call it Newtonian physics, if you will, to where they really do provide a physical set of criteria and proofs that show that these are legitimate quantum effects.
And, you know, Anthony, that's what I was going to say there. We often harp on about things from Einstein and Hawking, the black holes, things that have never and never will be reproduced within a laboratory. Yet that entanglement that you're talking about there, not only have they proven it, as you demonstrated, or as the Chinese have demonstrated, there's now actual working kind of apparatus where we can take advantage of said quantum mechanical effects. So a lot of it, yes, very out there, very in the land of woo, as I like to call it. But at the same time, quantum more real than the black holes, I would put forward.
Don't get me started on the black holes, my friend.
But here's another example of entanglement, Tony. And during the week, you know, I had to bite my tongue for a good few weeks. But our good friend Nano Girl, imagine how close she got to D-Wave. And that in itself, you know, even when she told me she was going for the first conversation, I was thinking to myself, it's almost written in the stars that one of us, somebody we should know, is going to end up there. But like we had suspected, Eric Ladzinski, very much about the science, none of the hype, none of the Geordie Rose-esque type descriptions of what he does, all about the science, Tony. And that was almost confirmation of what we had suspected anyway.
Yeah, I listened to your interview, your conversation, I should say, with Nano Girl the other evening. And, you know, I really commend her for having the ability, you know, the technical ability to even be interviewed by D-Wave. And I don't know exactly what the position was that she interviewed for, but that's okay.
Oh, I think it was actually to head up the brand new project for one of their new models. By the sounds of it, it was the chip architecture. It was really in the door, Tony. It was right up there.
Well, that is very impressive. Boy, I'd love to see her curriculum vitae. I'd like to know her background. But yeah, she speaks very well. She's very knowledgeable. And I think that her assessment of Eric Ladzinski, one of the co-founders of D-Wave, was spot on, as she said. And it's interesting. We have said that, you know, we're critical of the things that the people at D-Wave are doing, and yet we're not critical of the people themselves. We're not passing judgment over the people themselves. It's just people like Gordy Rose. I mean, he just brings it on. He just brings it on himself with the outrageous statements that we have covered at length and that I've provided transcripts of within the pages of Entangled magazine. So it is refreshing to hear that, you know, Eric is a surfer, he's a rock climber, he's a regular kind of guy, and he totally enjoys his quantum physics. And I think, you know, he would be a fantastic person to have on our show, Kev, and just have a, you know, a guy-to-guy conversation sitting around the campfire talking quantum physics.
Exactly. And Nano said, you know, he's passionate about it, Tony. You can really tell that that's his love. And even in the videos that you watch, where the very few videos that he goes on camera to do one-on-one kind of speaking, I mean, that passion comes through. And that's why, like you say there, I hold no umbrage against people at D-Wave per se. Absolutely not. And I've said to Nano as well, a lot of the negative kind of stuff that has spun off about that company, in no small part, is down to what Geordie Rose has said. And part of me knows that, you know, Geordie's a clever guy, Anthony. He knows that a bit of controversy is the best form of PR out there. And he's a PR money guy. He's good at what he does.
Oh, definitely. I think, you know, there's a certain aspect to this that is just pure showmanship. It's carnival barker. You know, it's the guy standing in the carnival trying to, you know, attract attention to, you know, whatever sideshow that's going on. So, you know, we have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt sometimes what he's talking about. And yet when you look at his own personal website and you see the things that he promotes, that he reads and he's interested in and his hobbies, it really makes you question, I think, at least myself, what his spiritual motivations are, where he's being motivated and influenced spiritually. Again, because you cannot separate the spiritual from the physical. But we know that D-Wave, they're people, they listen to the shows, your shows and my shows. I'm sure they listen to Nano Girl. Now they know who she is. They know where she's come from. But, you know, I really want to stand up and applaud Nano Girl for getting her foot in the door over there.
Oh, absolutely. I echo that. And thanks to you, I was able to give Nano a behind-the-scenes kind of crash course. She didn't want to go in there flying blind on the quantum mechanics. And I was quite impressed with myself. I managed to do it, and that's all thanks to you driving me on. And you said there you can't separate the physical from the spiritual. And I was sharing with the audience, I'd been invited to write a quick chapter for Bill Bean's book, quite apt for tonight. We've got a new author coming on. And I've kind of ventured into this now. And that's exactly how I finished the chapter, Anthony. You cannot separate the science from the spiritual. So it's quite apt that you should say that there. And I know you want to thank your patrons that have jumped on board this week. And of course, we've been asking for more help via Patreon, things like that, because we've been hit by the demonetization kind of wave called duplication. Now, this obviously leads me every day to see if there's any new information from YouTube. Yeah, right, I'll not hold my breath for that. But today I came across a video, and the thumbnail, it was all about duplication, and I could tell right away it was some kind of young guy from over, it was either Pakistan or India, somewhere like that. And I know that these people, they speak good English, so it didn't put me off going into the video to watch it at all. However, he was speaking in his native tongue. Now, what I done was, because YouTube is so super cool, right, and it transcribes everything and interprets it into English, I put on the closed captions, the subtitles. And boy, oh boy, oh boy. I was having a laugh with Jimmy Jeans last night about how Alexa really doesn't like the Scottish accent. And I thought we were unique in the world. I thought it was just us Scots people over here and our brogue tongue confused the AI. But it would seem that I am far from alone, because this was the most comical subtitles, closed caption, call it what you will, that I have ever seen. At one point, I'm sure I've seen it saying that the guy was cuddling a pineapple. So I've sent you the video. It was a bit of I needed a laugh this morning when I was looking into this. There's no new news. on what we done wrong, Anthony. But I know you want to thank your patrons that have stepped in to help us along the way.
Yeah, let me just read a short list of names here. I love the fact that we have new patrons coming on every week, and I want to acknowledge them. So without further ado, Brian, MC, and Keith, I want to thank you very much for responding to Kev's and my, well, we call it an appeal, but, just an invitation to join us and help us out on Patreon so that we can continue doing what we're doing. And hopefully October 17th for me, Kev, is the end of my 30-day banishment from monetization. Hopefully YouTube will step up and they'll do the right thing and allow us back on. But it has resulted in self-censorship, and that's too bad. I heard you talking to Jimmy Jeans about, hey, we can pretty much put whatever we want out there for the next 30 days. And no fear of demonetization because of what we say. But I don't know. We might have to self-censor for 30 days.
Well, Anthony,
to prove ourselves. I don't know.
Right. No, you're correct. And I've said to you behind the scenes, and it's about time I let listeners know as well. I've got 1,600 odd videos on the main channel. Obviously, I'm coming up for 1,000 episodes of KBS, and most of them are on there. And despite the fact all of these good guests I've had on, and people will, the timeless videos, I call them, like the stuff we've done on CERN that explained the science of that, the stuff I've done with Ilana, Dr. Eric Karlstrom, and I could rattle off 100 names here. These people, unfortunately, that information is going to be lost, at least on the main channel, because how can I even expect to get remonetized if I go back in there with exactly the same library of content that got me in the firing line in the first place? So without knowing exactly what it was that put me in danger, I'm realistically having to look at trimming back maybe 1,500 videos off of there, Tony. So if anyone out there wants to grab any of the material, I used to say re-upload it. Unfortunately, I can't tell you to do that anymore. I honestly can't. Not because I will strike you, but because so many other people out there have already re-uploaded myself and Anthony's content that you may get hit with a duplication order. So if you want the material, the MP3s, if you're not a subscriber to TFR and you can't afford it, you've maybe got about a week. You can get a YouTube downloader. You can take stuff off my YouTube channel, anything you like. And basically, Tony, going to have to rethink this kind of strategy if we are going to go forward on YouTube. You could call it self-censoring, absolutely. We just got to try and fly under the algorithm. That's the main thing, isn't it?
It is. And, I think it's unfortunate that neither yourself nor me or other channels receive a specific citation as to what it is that we have done wrong, what we have violated. And therefore, we're flying blind as far as, what can we do once we're reinstated in 30 days. I think in my case, and I think you agreed with me on this when we talked about it, in my case, it was the fact that I was posting on my channel the video that you posted on your channel, which was nothing more, except for your beautiful graphics that you added, it was nothing more than the audio of my Friday radio show that you produced for me, and you put it on your YouTube channel. Then I would download it with your permission onto my channel. And I think that's what got me in trouble in terms of duplication. And so we'll change that part of it.
Yeah, it's the double standards of it, though, Anthony, because everyone knows. I mean, even Newhead in the chat room, he sent me a YouTube link during the week, and this was a full movie, a full Hollywood movie that had ads every 3 minutes along the way. It was a random person had uploaded this. Now, that, by definition, that's copyright infringement. That's duplication of somebody else's content. But no, that this video had so many views, and every minute of every view making money on ads. And all of our content, people have re-uploaded that. And yet it's us, the actual genuine Anthony Patch and the genuine Kevin Baker, that gets accused of duplicating our own content that others have uploaded. It's crazy.
Yeah. And there's a channel that is purposefully taking our video that you've produced, that is posted on your channel, my channel, and posting those almost as soon as I post to my channel, it pops up on their channel. And I have complained with a formal complaint twice for copyright infringement and impersonation to YouTube about this specific channel, and they refuse to do anything about it. And it is absolute infringement. So there are a lot of channels, like you said. For example, there are comedy channels that will post comedy routines from stand-up comics who have full ownership of their material, and yet these people are posting these comedians, their videos, and they're making money off of it. So, it begs the question, how selective is the algorithm? And by that, I would ask people, begin to pay attention to the channels that start complaining about being demonetized. But perhaps more importantly, the channels that are not demonetized, because then by inference, I would say they are the troll sites. They are the ones that are in bed with YouTube, and they are the ones that are trying to infringe upon the monetizing that you and I are, trying to maintain, Kev.
And I had people saying to me, Anthony, well, you use Photoshop and you kind of cut images up and you make collages. And I'm very, very careful to go for Creative Commons images. And even the fonts I use, I try to make sure as much as I can that they're copyright free, so you are free to use them. So even doing that, it's our audio, it's our Photoshop, we put it together. I mean, there's absolutely no danger anything we're doing is copyrighted, Tony, apart from to ourselves. And isn't this a great example of what we talk about? Because we're dealing with an algorithm. That much has become very, very apparent. It's part of the new content ID matching system. And we have been very, very vocal about something that even the leading experts in AI are scratching their head over, and it's the black box problem. Now, we're sitting here and we're kind of ripping our hair out because we don't know what we've done wrong. We don't know how we were flagged up. We don't know why we were flagged up. And it would seem to me, Anthony, that the human side of YouTube are pretty much in the dark as well. And I think that explains their lack of human response to this issue, because even they are unable to tell us just what it was that the AI found wrong. It's that black box problem. It's just spitting channels out. It's acting independently. And then people like us are left to try and approach YouTube. And the people there are genuinely going, you know what, we actually don't know.
Well, it also brings in the discussion of bias in the programming, something we've covered extensively. So whether there's deliberate bias in the programming of the algorithm, or it is something that the algorithm, the AI-driven algorithm, has self-imposed. Now, I would say that it was deliberate. I would say that the algorithm is fairly simple and that it was deliberately biased against the alternative voice, the conservative voice, the voice of whistleblowers, let's say, not that necessarily that we're whistleblowers, but I think more importantly, the bigger issue here for the audience is that this demonstrates where things are at and where things are going, and that this will continue to compound and become more exacerbated as we move forward. So it isn't so much Kev Baker and Anthony Patch complaining about being demonetized as it is showing you the evidence of the algorithms, the evidence of AI involvement, and how it's being applied. And that will expand rapidly to many more channels and to many more venues other than just YouTube itself. So social media, we know that Facebook is heavily censoring and will continue to heavily censor. So take us out to the break. We got about a minute here, Kev.
No, I'm really looking forward to coming back after the break because we're going to be listening to Kathleen Urquhart. And this is a world exclusive. Not very often I get the chance to say that on here, but Kathleen's new book came out today, Pigtails and Potter's Field, and she will be speaking here first tonight after the break. This is one you don't want to miss. You've got 3 minutes to tell all of your friends and your contacts over on Facebook, over on Twitter, to join us live now on tfrlive.com for Kathleen M Urquhart coming up after the break. And don't forget, tonight, the Woo Crew will be back after the Anthony Patch Show. Myself, Joe Joseph, Scotty Lopez, Jimmy Jeans, who knows who else awaits us on Freaky Friday. But we'll be back very, very shortly with more from Kathleen M Urquhart, Anthony Patch, and myself right here on the Anthony Patch Show. Don't
You're
go
listening
anywhere.
to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
And welcome back, my friends. I'm Anthony Patch with Kev Baker this evening, and our special guest is my wife, Kathleen Urquhart. We are going to hear about her first book, and this is quite a work. I had the privilege of reading this book 3 times as her editor. The title of the book is Pigtails and Potter's Field, available today on Amazon and also through her website. Kev, before you get into the formal introduction here, let's step back in time a little bit. When you first met Kathleen and her last name Urquhart, tell us about the synchronicity of the last name in Scotland.
Well, for me personally, growing up on the southern bank of Loch Ness, Urquhart is a very, very important title because that's the name of the castle that actually sits predominantly on the bank of Loch Ness. I also used to play shinty. That's like ice hockey on grass, Anthony. No helmets, big sticks, a ball, 24 people chasing it. And I used to play for a team called Glen Urquhart. So it just takes us all back to that entanglement that we started the show on, man.
It's just too funny.
Can I tell you something really?
This is why I call her my princess, because she's her DNA heritage.
Well, trust me,
from
that
a castle.
That castle is not fit for any princess. Kathleen, I wouldn't let you roam that castle. It's in ruin. We'll find you a new
It's a
one.
little fixer-upper. Yes, it
Yeah.
needs a little work. Listen, when you spoke of Glen Urquhart, when I grew up in Charlestown, I lived on Main Street. We lived in an apartment building, and below us were the Urquhart family, who happened, his name was Glen Urquhart, and so he was. It's just odd that you say that, because as a little girl, we grew up over they were the relatives of mine, and so anyway, distant relatives, but still, Glen Urquhart.
The main village at the heart, or at the mouth of Glen Urquhart, is called, and I wouldn't expect any of you Americans ever to be able to pronounce this. It's called Drumnadrochit.
No.
Now, if you've seen that on a map, some of the pronunciations of that, it's almost as hysterical as that guy doing the duplication video live from Bombay. It really is. With that said, let us get into this magnificent piece of work entitled Pigtails and Potter's Field by Kathleen M Urquhart. The bond of sisters, the story of friends, the transgression of innocence, and the empowerment of hope. An inspiring work of realistic fiction portraying an Irish family and their struggle to overcome a devastating betrayal. Spanning the United States, Ireland, and England, this dramatic story chronicles the lives of 3 vibrant young women and their journeys through life, each having experienced sexual abuse as children. Overcoming great personal and emotional obstacles to achieve success in their chosen professions, a young pediatric nurse commits suicide at the height of her career. Valerie grapples with the circumstances surrounding her younger sister's life as never-revealed secrets come to light, exposing debauchery at a level that causes her to search for the truth and challenges her faith. Aided by a divine revelation and shocking testimonies from her closest friends, Val traces the path of perversion, uncovering the exploitation of a beloved family member whose own abuse as a child ripples across one ocean and 2 generations. Now, Kathleen was raised in historic Charlestown, home of the Bunker Hill Monument and famous warship Old Ironsides. Educated at a private, all-girls Catholic high school, she graduated from Burdett College in Boston, Massachusetts. A true lover of all things New England, she divides her time between Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Having travelled to Ireland, Kathleen represented the United States at the International Western Rose Festival held in County Mayo, Ireland. She works as an executive assistant to the president of a private college in Boston, Massachusetts. And Kathleen Urquhart's literary works have spanned from writing poetry to analysing and deciphering the spiritual side of quantum physics. Her poetry has been showcased in various anthologies, and she is a regular contributor to the science and research publication Entangled magazine. As a mother of 3 sons, she respectfully admires the amazing accomplishments of her growing children, marvelling at their diverse gifts, talents, and abilities. A native of New England, Kathleen and her husband, Anthony, happily take their home in New Hampshire and Vermont. So without any further ado, Kathleen, welcome to the show, and I cannot wait. This is the show that we've been waiting to do for so long, and congratulations on the book finally coming out.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm thrilled. I'm relieved. It's been a long time, and but I think it's going to be well worth it. I feel that it's a timely message. It's very relevant to where we are right now in our world, to the concentration, if you will, in this generation of those who have experienced sexual abuse. None escape from that today. And now we seem to have, in this particular generations, men and women marrying one another that have had it happen to one, if not both. And the results are astounding. People are having very difficult times maintaining long-lasting, loving relationships. I think this plays a huge part in it because of the emotional damage that happens and the difficulty in trusting. And I think all of that is exacerbated too by the devices that we use and the technology that we employ that lends itself to what I call today electronic whispering, and certainly provides the environment for those things to happen. And so, it all comes into play, but there's hope, and it's a crime against humanity that I think that we need to address. And I know that this book highlights the lives of 3 young women, very beautiful, professional, and talented women. And through the story, I believe that people, both men and women, will be able to relate and see a little bit of themselves in these characters and learn from how it is that they work out finding happiness and peace in their life, given, the traumatic circumstances that happened as children.
Now, Kathleen, even the title itself, the first time I heard this, very unique. Now, what was the inspiration behind that?
Well, Pigtails conjures up the vision of a young girl, and Potter's Field refers to a couple of things. It's a literal place where the poor and indigent are buried. It's a site designated by a city or a town where they lay to rest those people that might not have relatives or any money or, sadly, no name. In New York City, part of Hart's Island off the coast of the Bronx on Long Island Sound was established for this purpose. And I play with the semantics of this phrase by referring or referencing a place in Montana, a homestead, where across the vast acreage of land are the remains of broken Indian pottery pieces. So it's the actual place, it's the reference to fields where broken pottery would be cast But the most interesting to me was the biblical reference to a famous potter's field in the book of Matthew where the greatest betrayal of faith took place. Scripture recounts the story of Judas and his betrayal of Jesus to the Jewish priests. And when they realized the gravity of his actions, when Judas realized the gravity of his actions, he threw back at the priests the 30 pieces of silver he received for his part in the apprehension and eventual crucifixion of Jesus. The Sanhedrin didn't want it back, recognizing it as blood money, and instead they bought a field in which to bury the poor. And Judas, in his remorse, we know, committed suicide and hung himself. And you know that too has significant meaning. So, yeah, it encompasses many different meanings.
So I gave the listeners a little taste of what this is about when I read out the kind of brief blurb there. But, I mean, you touched upon how it's very relevant to our time when you just opened up there. But tell us a bit about the actual story itself, if you don't mind, without giving too much away, Kathleen.
Well, like I said, you know, it traces, it talks about chronicling the lives of these 3 young women and their journeys, having experienced sexual abuse as children. They overcome their childhood trauma and press on to achieve notable success in their professional fields. And there's one young woman, a pediatric nurse, and she's also an award-winning Irish step dancer, commits suicide at the height of her career, leaving everyone wondering, you know, what happened. And paralleling their story, it's almost 2 stories in one, is that of 2 priests. And I go to great lengths to highlight the workings of a humble man of God who's true to his calling. He'd give his life for his congregation and exemplifies the meaning of being a good shepherd. But also, there's always the contrast, and there's the unveiling of a rogue predatory priest from Ireland whose abuse ripples across, I like to say, one ocean in 2 generations. But one of the things, Kev, that I really feel is important to highlight is the message about clergy. Because I think when all of these stories seem to break and come into play, you know, there's always the mention of clergy. And I think we have to be very, very careful with that. We know that these sexual predators, it's a problem that plagues humanity as a whole. It's not strictly a priest problem. I think it's magnified because of the role that they play and the trust factor that is placed on them in their role, especially in their representation of being God-like, if you will, in the eyes of their congregation. It has caused many to pull away from the faith. And I think that we have to be very, very careful because we are entering times in our world where we need to draw nearer to our faith. Not every priest is a pedophile. I
absolutely agree with that. It's the same as when people say, you know, oh, the police are bad. You know, you do get bad police, but it doesn't mean all of them are bad. And unfortunately, these deviants, these perverts, they're in every walk of life. And I think we find such a kind of concentrated congregation within the Catholic Church because of the actual protection that they've been afforded at times as well, Kathleen. But then, again, like you say, we can't lose sight of the fact that not every Catholic priest out there is a bad person. In fact, the exact opposite of that. For I would hope every bad one, that there is one equally good one.
You know, I think the Church, by the urging of the congregants and held accountable by the congregation, is working to weed out those who have hurt, you know, the flock. And it's very important. You know, I grew up Catholic. Later on in my life, I found myself spending some time in an evangelical church. Then I began to see some things about that, you know, made me question certain things. And so, you know, my spiritual walk has evolved. But recently in my working, I work for a Greek Orthodox college and school of theology. And, you know, every denomination, it seems, has some things that have happened to it, and nobody goes unscathed, I don't think. But one of the things that I admire most about and see working very, very well in the Greek Orthodox Church is the combining, if you will, of clergy and laity. They put a great emphasis on bringing clergy and laity together to work. That doesn't mean that these things haven't happened in that denomination. A few things have happened there too. It's happened in Protestantism. It's happened everywhere. But I think when you bring clergy and laity together, there is a much stronger accountability factor involved. That's not to say that it's not going to stop everything, but it certainly is a first line defense, and it's a good way, I think, to be able to have checks and balances, is to bring those two together. And I mentioned that in my book. I did not want to overemphasize and make this book strictly about priests. The book does trace the path of perversion and come to the source. But there is also in this story an amazing man of God who, is true to his calling, loves his congregation, would give his life for them. And there are many, many good religious leaders out there that feel that way. And I just don't want us in our excitement about all of this to paint with a wide brush that all priests are bad and give people, an out if they're searching for one to blame or to pull away, because that's not the answer. In these times, we need to draw near. And, I think people need to go back to their churches. They need to go back and sit before their religious leaders and share with them their hearts and tell them what bothers them. And I think that there you're going to be able to hold them accountable at a local, state, and national level.
Absolutely. And, with everything coming out right now, all the real information, all the misinformation, all the disinformation, it's critically important that we do treat every case, be it from the Catholic Church or, in my own experience recently, Kathleen, from Hollywood. It's so easy for us to bias our opinion on all of these characters within the Vatican, all of these actors and actresses in Hollywood. But like you say, not all of these people are actually bad. Not all of them are doing this really evil, heinous acts that we are exposing at this time. And it's so important that we use that discernment whenever we're looking at any of these cases. And we do treat them on a case-by-case basis because, in my opinion, putting out misinformation, even mistakenly on this topic, Kathleen, this does so much more damage to the real cases out there and the real investigations that are going on that really it would be worthwhile just not saying anything at all.
Well, the fact of the matter is we will never know the truth. We won't know what's fact. We won't know what's fiction unless there happens to be a documented history of repeated acts that are committed by a specific individual, backed up with, witnesses and things of that nature. Anthony and I were talking the other night specifically about this and how Hollywood, they just eat their young there anyway. I mean, they just devour themselves. And when you hear a story of, perhaps a or actress, and I'm not saying this didn't happen, but when we look at Hollywood and we see the intentions of some of these people trying to break into a business that does nothing but exploit people's situations, political situations, when they begin to exploit these things, you have to remember they're entering at that point, and they've got to know this. They're entering into a very, very dangerous arena. And many, many women and men have, willingly gotten on the couch, for lack of a better term, with some of these producers to further their career or to enter into that world. And so is it fair to come back 20 years later and say, oh, this happened with said producer? well, you know what? You have to think about too. I don't want to, again, myself, paint all of Hollywood with a wide brush, but we need to take everything with a grain of salt. Could it happen? Did it happen? Again, we really will never know unless there is a documented trail of witnesses and, to be able to, account for this and to give it some credence, if you will.
Absolutely. And I think, this is why your book is going to be so powerful on a personal level, because it's going to touch many, many people. And there's going to be so many out there who can relate to either one of the characters or some of the themes that you're presenting within the story. And is that what really pushed you initially, Kathleen, to write this book? Or was there one particular kind of event that made you decide you needed to do this?
Within my family, and I will speak only to my own experience, I had an uncle, and it's difficult to talk about, but I had an uncle who we would have to sit across from every Sunday at dinner, knowing that he had done these things. And in my own situation, I'll never forget, it was Christmas Day. I was about 7 years old, and we were at my grandmother's house, and I had said, he had forgot the camera. And so my aunt said to him, well, run up to the house and get it. And my aunt used to, she had a little apartment, and I'll never forget, I remember all the details. She had a purple bathroom. I remember the carpet being this olive green. She had this little baby grand piano that I used to love to play that you could sit under. So I had said, can I go with you? And he said, yes. And so I went with him to go get the camera. And as a 7-year-old, the only thing I was thinking about was going to play the piano. So I ran into the living room, and I was just, banging away on the keys. And he said to me, I turned around, he said, it's time to go. And he was leaning against the wall, and he reached down to grab my hand. And when he did, he began to force me to touch him. And I began to try and pull away, and I said, no. And he wouldn't let my hand go, but I wriggled it away, and I ran around him, and I ran down the stairs. When I got into the car, and I'll never forget this, it was a yellow Nova with black leather interior. And he said, this is our secret, and we won't say anything to anyone, will we? And I just looked at him and I said, no. And on another occasion, again, we were vacationing at the same place on a lake. And my mother was going out with my grandmother and aunts, and she said, stay out of the house until we get back, watch your sister. So if I was maybe 8 years old, my sister was just a couple of years younger. And so I took her, and I'll never forget, it was a really hot day. And I had to, use the bathroom. We had been out swimming. And so I went inside, and he was sitting on the couch, and he motioned for me to come and sit next to him. So I told Eileen, you stay outside until I come out. And so he began to touch my leg, and at that moment I heard the car door. My mother had forgot something and was coming in, so I ran out the back door so she wouldn't see that I was in the house. And I grabbed my sister, and we went to this little shed behind the house, and I made her climb a tree with me, and we sat on these really hot black shingles on the top of this shed, so I had a vantage point to be able to see the road when my mother and grandmother were coming back. And I wouldn't let her get down. I said, no, you can't go in there. And so, it was experiences like those in my life that spurred me on to write a poem, because eventually this story broke in my family about my uncle, and it nearly shattered my entire family. And, many things come into play when this breaks. And the interesting thing within the family dynamic is that everyone loves everyone, but when someone becomes a victim and someone is the perpetrator, the family begins to pull in the wagons around the perpetrator, and the victim within the family becomes the victim again, but none of it's intentional. It's just that at that point, the family is divided because they love the one who's the perpetrator. They love the one who was victimized, but the victim at that point, that relative, begins to represent shame to them. And when that happens, the family pulls in the wagons around the other one because they don't want this knowledge getting out. Now, in my situation, I grew up in a small town in Charlestown. My uncle was a Boston firefighter. He was a Grand Knight of the Knights of Columbus in Charlestown. He was a youth hockey referee for Charlestown, a Charlestown youth hockey referee. And eventually, when this news was going to break and he was going to be held accountable by law, he hung himself at the Knights of Columbus in Charlestown. And so, it does have a personal situation. It does impact me personally. But there are others that I know that he did this to. And I won't mention their names, but I know who they are. And this is something that, as one individual, I can honestly say that we will be most effective when we come back from the break. I'll explain that a little bit more. I'm noticing that I've gone on a bit, and so I don't want to go over the break, but I'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back.
Just as well you've seen the break coming, Kathleen. I'd absolutely missed it there. We're engrossed in this conversation. Mr. Patch has got the slippers on tonight, I see. And we'll be back after the break to hear more about this amazing new book, Pigtails and Potter's Field. It's out right now, and you can get it over on Kathleen's website. Kathleen, I will give you the honours of letting the people know your website where they can get the book.
Oh, yes, go over. It's very easy. My first initial, K, Urquhart, URQUHART.com. KUrquhart.com.
We'll be back after this.
Now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome back, my friends. I'm joined this evening by my wife, Kathleen Urquhart, author of Pigtails and Potter's Field, and we've kind of gone through the preliminary. We've given you the backstory on why she's written this book, but I'd like to share with you the perspective of her editor from her publishing company. And this is a book that is available in hard copy or in soft copy or as an ebook, but from her editor from the publishing company. I'm just going to go ahead and read this. It's about 3 paragraphs. And then I've asked Kathleen to come back and read her piece of poetry that really inspired the title of this book, Pigtails and Potter's Field. So without further ado, I'm going to give Kev an opportunity to sit back with the smoking jacket on and his pipe and his slippers, as he accuses me of doing, while he does such an eloquent job of interviewing Kathleen. So here we go. I'm so honored to have been able to edit Pigtails and Potter's Field. It is intelligently written. Each theme, the child abuse within the Catholic Church, the deaths, secrets, and suicide, that this manuscript tackles is well researched and masterfully handled. The plot is very well executed. The pacing is masterful. There's not one dull moment. This is truly a roller coaster ride of a manuscript. From the first word to the last, every word, every action is moving to the conclusion. The twist, and I won't give it away here, is one that truly helps to further propel an already intriguing story. The denouncement is kicked into high gear as Val first learns the truth about what happened to her sister, and then goes about setting it right. In reading the author's editing questionnaire, special attention was asked to be paid to the more disturbing scenes in the manuscript. After reading through these scenes, it's tough to offer suggestions on how to improve the writing of these scenes. They are crafted with great care and attention to detail, without being overly dramatic or unnecessarily vulgar. The scenes are emotional and visceral and gut-wrenching. And yes, at times they were tough to read, but it is my firm opinion that they are handled with delicacy. The sequencing of the book is great. It's a great writing device that only helps to make this story stand out more. Each chapter builds on top of each other. It's a great testament to the skill of the writer that these chapters need not be in chronological order to make sense. The most important thing to note is that this approach to telling this story works, and it works well. It helps in presenting backstories in a fresh way. It is effective because it aids in the pacing of the manuscript, and overall, it lends itself to an effective climax. Again, her editor says, I cannot thank you enough for allowing me to edit Pigtails and Potter's Field. It is impactful and memorable. I wish you nothing but the best and continued success in all of your writing endeavors. Now, I read that to you because this comes from a woman who is a professional editor. I would estimate she's probably read and edited well over 100 manuscripts. And, you know, I was given the opportunity early in our relationship, Kathleen and myself getting to know each other, to read the manuscript, and then she graciously asked me to edit it as well. And I'm a reader. I am a reader of science, but I am a voracious reader. I read quite a broad spectrum of topics and subject matter, including many novels. And reading this manuscript from a first-time author, this book reads like a bestseller. It does not read like a first-time novel. So I say that not just because Kathleen is my wife, but as trying to look at it from a dispassionate editorial perspective, as her editor did. It is astounding. It is astounding how well this book is crafted and put together and how well it flows. And it keeps your attention. This is a long novel, but it has so many characters and storylines in it that it necessarily needs to be a long story. But I was struck by the principal character, Valerie. She's a very strong woman, and she pulls all of these characters together. She literally holds their lives in her hands. And it's compelling how she does this, and yet has to struggle with her own questioning and her own frailties and weaknesses and her desires for her own life going forward. So it's a complex story, but it comes together in a very readable fashion. So with having said all that, I would like to give you further backstory, and that's the poem that really served as the seed, as the germination for this incredible novel. So with that, Kathleen, I'm going to toss it over to you to go through your beautiful piece of poetry. You are an excellent writer, not only in the novel, but in the poetic. So I thank you for sharing this with our audience today.
Well, thank you. They say that there has to be something with the Irish in poetry, and I don't know where exactly I got it from. I just have to believe that God has just given me a way to be able to express my feelings and emotions, and it's very therapeutic. Mm-hmm. And when people ask me, well, how did this book even come about? I said it began with a poem. Using the poem as an outline, I drafted an outline for the story. So here is Pigtails and Potter's Field. When into existence we are conceived and birthed to life anew, life's playing fields are leveled for each helpless ingenue, soon placed in arms that will bear our weight, and in time our sorrows too. Innocence, innately beautiful, emanates from virginal hearts, soon toddlers that will run ahead, and on to youthful adventures embark. There are no cares for the future, or plans to be made, for in this brief span of time, all in life is to play. This is how life should be. Yet for daughters of turpitude, another course is set, where paper dolls and costume jewels in boxes are kept. Their lids conceal treasures in worlds of pretend, while tender hearts bear the scars, violated by men. A child's trust torn asunder by perverse appetence. Adolescence is spent concealing depravity's mark, the resulting behavior, a promiscuous heart. Insecurity's role in her life will prevail unless lascivious truth is expressed and unveiled, and the deviant brought to justice for the crimes that took place, so to transform images of intimacy long thought debase. As a young woman, the struggle for normalcy cannot be willed. Anguished thoughts, habitually silenced by pharmaceuticals or spirits distilled. Often depression and anger lead to crime and more strife for this tormented one, long hollowed by the iniquity of life. What began in childlike wonder did debauchery steal, while those with knowledge feigned mute, letting evil prevail. When heads bow in remembrance, or under the weight of guilt kneel, shall they realize their silence filled the coffin now buried and sealed, and grieving hearts are left to ponder on the bitter life that spanned from Pigtails to Potter's Field.
You know, I've read that many times, and just listening to you share that with our audience, it makes me think, why would someone buy a book? Why do we buy novels? Why do we buy fiction? Most of the time it's to be entertained. It's to be uplifted. It's to be encouraged. It's to take us somewhere else, in particular with science fiction, such as my books, to take you to another world, perhaps, even if it's based on our own planet, but to take you to another place as a diversion, as entertainment. And so an audience member would be asking the question, why would I read a book of such a somber and perhaps depressing subject? And I would offer this answer from my perspective, having read this book 3 times now, that it is uplifting. It is encouraging. This is a dark topic, but this is a rallying point. We are faced as a society. We even look at the Supreme Court nominee in the United States that is facing allegations of sexual misconduct. This is such a predominant topic in the mainstream media, in the popular conversation now, in the political correctness and self-censorship that Kevin and I talked about at the beginning of the show, that this is something we have to face. Let me ask you this question, Kathleen, about families around the world, not just in this country. Do you think that there is any family that goes untouched by this topic?
No. It crosses all socioeconomic boundaries. It knows no bounds. It reaches into the homes of the very poor and the very wealthy. It doesn't matter what culture you are. It shows no discrimination whatsoever. And it's something that touches everyone's life. And again, I made the statement that it's concentrated in this particular generation. I think for a number of reasons, which we've covered in the past on different shows and in your magazine, with respect to the spiritual condition of the world right now and where it's headed and where we're at. So, we really have to guard our hearts with extra measure, and it requires an immense amount of discipline and saying no and turning away from things that are before our eyes and ears every single day. You asked about why would somebody invest time in reading a book of this nature and this size? And, I'm not a well-known author yet. And so I didn't have one person other than you and a few very, very close friends that I asked to read this. And my dear friend Linda, who has been so encouraging to me through this, when I asked her to write a review for me, now she wouldn't be known, to the rest of the world. Nobody would know her. But she had a very unique perspective. And she said, reading this book, reading is a solitary act. Only you can do it. But it's a meeting place. It's a solitary meeting place for the mind and spirit of the individual to come, where they can put themselves, in a sense, it's almost like an augmented reality. Mm-hmm. They get into this book and the lives of these characters, and they see themselves, walking the road with them, or opening that door to the house, and knowing what's behind, or not knowing what's behind. But what it does is it allows you to walk in unity, in a very unique, I would say it's a fellowship, a very unique fellowship today. Because this problem with sexual abuse, it's not ever going to be eradicated by any government initiative. It's not ever, there's never going to be enough laws on the books or, restrictions in place that the legal system will catch every one of them. It's not going to happen that way. It's already happened to so many. But this book, I believe, is a rallying point in that each individual is part of a collected army now, if you will. But it's an army that we will probably never get on and meet at a certain geographical point and say, okay, we're all together, let's advance against the enemy. It's a solitary one-on-one. For me, it's with God, but it's a solitary place where there's an understanding that you are part of a collective whole. There is now more of us victims than there are of our perpetrators. We are in the majority. They are in the minority. So if I start by talking about or exposing, if you will, those individuals, at this point in my life, that person's not an issue anymore. But if we start with our own collective experiences, and if these people are still alive and influencing our life, even if you've grown up and you're married and you only have to go around Uncle Charlie once a year at Christmas time and you tell your kids stay away from him, it has to be more than that. That's not enough to just say, stay away from Uncle Charlie. It is now your responsibility as an individual. You are now charged with looking at a perpetrator who committed a crime, and your silence could cause the future. And I hate to say it, it sounds severe, but your silence in allowing this will subject someone else to his or her unwanted advances. I refer to it as personal and intimate transgressions. And I'm trying, it might have a nice soothing sound to it, but we get to a point where you keep saying something over, like we hear the term drug abuse or we hear sexual abuse, and after a while we become numb to it. But if as individuals, we are in a really unique place here in time where so many people are voicing it now, that we are not letting shame keep us silent anymore. We now are gaining strength and confidence and peace in knowing that we weren't at fault. It wasn't our fault. Somebody else, stronger than us or bigger than us, intimidated us. And now we can look around at humanity without saying a word and say, I know you've been affected by it. If not you personally, it could have been your sister, it could have been your brother, but there is a silent, very, very powerful fellowship, quote unquote, that we now belong to. It's not an organized fellowship, but it is one with an understood mandate that says that we must go forward in this world, and with the understanding that everyone has been affected by it. And it is our responsibility to put safeguards in place to protect our children and our grandchildren from this ever happening again. How do you do that? Get your faces out of your phones, get your faces away from your computers, and look at your children. Speak to them. Don't text them. Talk to them. And we have to be so blatant that we need to explain to our children at a very early age what is sexual abuse. It's not just, oh, not good touches and bad touches. That's not good enough. The world is so blatant that you can't turn on the television without seeing people rolling around on the floor and in the bed and on the grass. And, it is right in front of you. And so we need to tell our children exactly what it is. Explain to them what sexual abuse is. I had a dear friend of mine who was one of the first people to read this book, and a dear, dear Christian woman. And I say that for emphasis because I think she handled it with a great compassion and sensitivity, which is what Christians should be doing, and all people for that matter. But she told me the story of her son and how he would get off the bus, and a high school student that lived just a few doors down would take her son to his house, and then out back behind the woods. And for years, he was sexually abused by this young man. And then when it was discovered and she went to the authorities, do you know that she couldn't do anything because he was underage to protect her son from having to get on the same bus with him? And so obviously she would drive him to school after that. But this little boy had to live in the same neighborhood with this young man, and they did basically nothing to stop them. So the responsibility falls 100% on the parents to be open, to watch for the signs. And I'm afraid because of technology diverting our attention the way that it does, you're not seeing your children suffer. You're not getting those clues. You spend so much time away from them working all the time that you're not seeing those, those clues. You're not signaled into it. And this is a solitary battle, but it's a collective battle. And if each one of us, knowing that we're part of this army, does our part, it's almost as if we are strategically placed within society, within our country, within our world, to be able to influence just our sphere around us. And so we are like policemen of our own circles of family. We are set up as the righteous ones now who have been there, should be clued in to being able to catch the signs because it happened to us, so that we can pick up on those things with our children and then stop the perpetrators in their tracks. How do you do it? It's so simple. You open your mouth and you say something. That's all you have to do. If that means you confront that individual yourself and say, I know what you did to me. If you come near my children, there'll be hell to pay. Because the police aren't going to take care of it. And I am not advocating any type of violence here. What I am advocating is boundaries. Which brings me, when we get back from the break, I want to, of course, tackle the spiritual side of this. How do we elicit God's help in this situation? I believe the cry of sexual abuse against humanity today has risen to God's ears, much like when he said to Moses, the cries of the bondage of my people from Pharaoh has come before me. I believe that the cry of sexual abuse is so pronounced in this day and age that the cry has gone up and has come up before God's ears in such a way that it is undeniable at this point. And so God is not going to leave us unaware. He is not going to leave us without a recourse. And so I think if we begin to have voices that people can rally around and have the support, the encouragement, when I was pregnant with my sons, at any time I'd get a little twinge or a pain, I'd call my mother and I'd say, Mom, do you remember this? And she'd say, oh, yeah, I remember. It's nothing to worry about. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Oh, nope. That always happens when I was about that far along. And basically all I needed was somebody that could just come alongside me and say, it's going to be okay. And that's what we need from one another. is to look at every human being and say, somewhere in your life, this crime has affected you, either directly or through a close family member or a dear friend that you have. Your heart goes out to them. You know, my story is not just about what happened to me, though it inspired me to write the poem. You know, I had stories after the poem was published where friends and people from all over the world began to write me and share with me their stories of sexual abuse. And a very dear friend of mine confessed to me that she was sexually abused for many years by her father. And so, you know, we hear terms today like, oh, father and daughter dates, you know, daddy dates. She said, well, I have a totally different twist on that term, you know, and we just have to understand that these are times that are going to cause us to come together with a collective understanding that we are part of a unique fellowship. We are an army. We are going to prevail because we do hold all the power. They tried to silence us with shame. We, in turn, are going to turn the tables on that and expose them so that their shame is seen. No longer is it the victim that has to remain silent. No, those days are gone. We are going to go ahead and we are going to point out those people that have done this. And again, it's not going to be a witch hunt. Anthony and I, we were talking the other night, you know, when we look back and we look at our adolescent years and, you know, the first time that you kissed a boy, you kissed a girl, or the first time, you know, remember they used to refer to it as first base, second base, third base, you know, that sort of thing. You know, you're not going to go back when you're 46 years old and accuse the first boy who kissed you or touched you above the waist, you know, as being a sexual predator. There's normal experimentation, if you will. So we need to be very, very careful in what we do and how we approach this. But definitely, you know, we have to Kathleen. Take the initiative.
When we come back from the break, Kev, go ahead and take us out to break. Haven't heard from you, so we're going to move into the next segment, folks.
Well, what an amazing show tonight, and such brilliant speaking there from Kathleen, and really been so honest with all of us here tonight, giving us the backstory behind Pigtails and Potter's Field. Please check that out. I'll drop the link to where you can buy that book in the description, or you can go and visit kurquhart.com, and that's KURQUHART.com. We'll be back on the other side. We've got one more segment to go with Kathleen.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency.
All right, welcome back, my friends. You've been listening to Kathleen Urquhart, my wife, who is the author of Pigtails and Potter's Field. And, you know, this is a somber topic to get into, and it's obviously quite divergent from the scientific discussions we have on this program, but it is a topic and a subject that affects everyone around the world. And we do need to take this seriously, and we do need to reach out within our circle and sphere of influences to speak out, to, you know, get out there. Don't just let someone go on and violate some innocent child just because you haven't got guts enough to speak up and confront this person, or gather 2 or 3 other people around you to confront this person, to take it upon yourselves to intervene, and take it to the degree that you feel it is necessary to stop this behavior. And in the book, there is a solution that is offered to one of the perpetrators who violates young girls. And the family gathers together and force this person into therapy and hold them accountable, and hold the clinic conducting the therapy accountable. There are professionals that we can force people into getting help. The old interventions, you know, story, if you will. that methodology. But, there's a higher power beyond just ourselves, and that's God himself, and that's Jesus Christ, and the power of the Holy Spirit. So the spiritual side of this is where we're going in this discussion with Kathleen now, because as you said in the early part of this presentation this evening, Kathleen, that there's a spiritual power that has to take precedent, because law enforcement, government, even individuals often lack the power to really be able to intervene to address what's really behind these malicious acts, these violent acts against innocent children. And that's the evil. That's the pure evil that is influencing people to perpetrate such actions against others. So I'd like you to just bring that spiritual topic to the table and your perspective on that, and how you think that the spiritual side can turn the tables on what's going on throughout the world.
If we go back to the first webinar that we had, not the one in Texas, not full spectrum. No, what was the first one that we had?
It was full spectrum dominance.
What was the second one that we did when I was up at Divergence, Fullness of the Gentiles?
Divergence, yes.
I gave on the board, I unveiled what was God's outward expansion of the universe and the formation of crystalline and tetrahedrons, and how, matter, in a sense, came into being. And I talked about the philosophical of evil and how it advances within God's construct. It can never create anything new, but it has to go over the lines, if you will, of God's construct. And how does Satan advance? Well, God tells us that Satan can come into a person's life. If we look at one of those octagons and we break it up into its sections, as we did with the 6 tetrahedrons within the sphere, the original sphere.
Within the hexagon, yeah.
That represents the aspects of a human's life. If they're a female, it could be one person being a mother, a sister, an aunt, a cousin, a daughter, and you could, so it represents the fullness of a person's life and all of the many aspects of it. We had said that at every point where Satan has to, he's caught in the recursive movement. And so every time he makes even one move, he has to right himself, if you will, before he can lay down and make the next move. So in order for him, in the process of completing that recursive process, to claim one line, he has to move 7 times. But do you remember the story that Jesus said?
Mm-hmm.
He said, if he comes in and he cleans the house, if a person allows sin back into their lives, Satan at that point is allowed to come in and bring 7 others with him, more stronger than the original one. So we say, how is Satan advancing in this world? How does Satan's construct advance and take over a person's life and consume it faster? It would take him forever if he was bound to the lay down, stand up, lay down, back and forth, recursive. It would take him forever to do that. So it's to his advantage to get the whole of a man or woman to sin, which is why he concentrates on God's people, because he knows that when God comes into a human's life, he cleans it. When Jesus comes in, he cleans it. So that house is wiped clean. So if Satan can get a human being to fall, they don't fall just as they don't fall just in one particular area. They fail as a father, they fail as a son, they fail as a brother, they fail as an uncle, they fail as a nephew. Boom, boom, boom. There's the whole construct right within that one octagon, those 6 aspects within it. And he can come in and in one shot take over in what would have taken him so many moves to do. So I say all of that as a picture so that you can see that in this generation, He has caused men and women to fail through the age-old seduction process of lust and perversion, and it's being fed to us now individually on our laptops and on our cell phones. It can be done so secretively. So no, we can't rely on police and government officials and governments to take care of any of this, because they're all doing the same thing too. They're all looking at the same things. They're all having the same desires. Some of them are in better financial positions to be able to hide their acts. They can buy what they want, but not anymore. Not anymore. Because we see how it's advancing. And the way that we stop evil, the way that we stop Satan's expansion, as we bring God's power into our life. Okay, so how does all of that relate to sexual abuse and what victims can do? I'm going to say something that's going to sound to some people like the impossible thing to do. We'll just take a young girl, for example, who has been sexually abused by a family member over and over and over for many years of her life, to the point where it has broken her down. She has turned to drugs and alcohol. She has scarred her body with tattoos because she never wants to forget the horrors that have happened to her, which is, and again, I've actually heard people say that tattoos become addictive. Of course it does. It's because it's urging you to do something that God doesn't want you to do. He doesn't want you to mark your body. But they do it because they don't want to forget. And so what I propose and put forth as the underlying key to freedom from the abuse of the past, and it's going to sound crazy, but it's the only way that you can be truly set free to have the opportunity to live a life that is healthy and peaceful with rewarding and fruitful relationships. And that requires forgiveness. And you must say to yourself, how can I forgive that brutality? How can I forgive somebody who did that to someone so innocent? So at that point, we have to look at what is forgiveness. What truly is forgiveness? What does that look like? That doesn't mean that you have to go up to this person, shake their hand, give them a hug, and invite them over for dinner, and everything is going to go back to being the way that it was before. No, that's not what forgiveness looks like. Forgiveness means that you find within yourself some semblance of peace gathered from the understanding that this person that did this to you, I can almost guarantee had something horrific happen to them. They may have had a father or a mother. It's not just men with women. I mean, women today are taking advantage of young men. And what's happening is we need to be able to have within our understanding that something probably happened within the perpetrator's life that caused them to become the monster that they are, and that they have struggled probably all of their life with torment, the likes of which that we probably can't even understand. And they hate themselves. They do. They hate themselves. Now, I'm not trying to drum up a pity party for these people, because it's very clear that boundaries have to be maintained. But forgiveness is the ability for you to look honestly at your situation and say, okay, these things happened to me. I'm sure something happened to this person. I'm going to forgive them, even if I don't know exactly what happened in their life, because unforgiveness, if left unchecked, is going to eat away at the victim like a cancer. And it's going to consume every aspect of your life as a mother, as a sister, as a daughter, as a wife, as a mom. It's going to consume every part of your life, because that's what unforgiveness does. It destroys any healthy relationship that you ever hope to have. So we check Satan by doing the unthinkable. But then in the process of doing that, who do we exemplify?
Jesus Christ.
Who do we reflect when we begin to turn the tables And it's a personal, silent, spiritual battle. The world's not going to hold up a sign and say, Kathleen Urquhart, you forgave somebody. Good for you. No, the only well done, my good and faithful servant will come on Judgment Day that I hope I hear, from God himself. But it requires the victim to take the very next step and become even stronger by being the one that can say, I'm going to forgive this person. I don't understand them. They hurt me. I'm not going to be their best friend. I'm not going to be inviting them over to my house. I'm going to put up boundaries because I need to keep myself safe and my family safe. But by saying that you forgive someone, it means that you are handing them over, in a sense, to God, because you can't change their life, but you do want God to help you change yours. And when you give him that right by stepping out of the way and saying, I don't understand, but I'm going to forgive them, we can see exactly how we walk in the footsteps of God our Father, who looks upon our lives. Everything that we're forgiving, in a sense, from someone else, in a way, we've done to God already. And so he's looking at our lives and saying, do you remember the time that you stole all those things from the store? Yeah. Well, I forgave you for that when you came to me, didn't I? Yes, you did. I forgave you when you cheated on your spouse. You still have to live out, the results of that. But I forgave you, didn't I? And you say, yes, I did. Yes, you did. And so we need to be able, if we really want to understand the heart of God the Father and know that we're his children, we need to take the higher road, if you will, and walk a path that's very narrow. There's not many people on it, but that's when we turn the tables and put up these amazing roadblocks in Satan's path. And that's where the power comes in. So I think it's a message that a lot of people who have been victimized will not want to hear at first. But I think when they begin to see the bigger picture and think about it, they're going to see that this is the only way for them to achieve the freedom, the emotional freedom, the spiritual freedom, because otherwise it hinders you from being able to fully love again and heal.
Yeah, it takes that, I use the phrase taking the wind out of their sails. When someone is threatening you, when someone is overpowering you, when someone is trying to dominate your life, or someone's just trying to argue with you, you take the wind out of their sails, you disempower them. When you're forgiving someone, you're taking that power they have over your life, that influence over your life, taking that power, that wind out of their sails, so that they no longer influence your life. The self-abuse that occurs with victims, alcohol, drugs, you mentioned tattooing as an outward manifestation of that anger, of that grief, of that pain in their life, that gets taken away. But that ability to be that objective, to separate your emotions, step off to the side and take that bigger picture perspective of the perpetrator having something occurred in their life that first they were a victim before they then later in their life became a perpetrator. Mm-hmm. That forgiveness is taking that perspective of going beyond seeing the person as a perpetrator and asking what caused them to become the way they are. And when you begin to examine, even if you're not able to find that information out, but at least to look at that perpetrator as perhaps having first been a victim, then gives you that ability to step into the arena of forgiving that person, because now you understand what drives them. You're still hurting, but now you're looking at it from a completely different point of view. And that different point of view that allows you to forgive someone for their actions against you takes that power
It does.
out of that whole equation to where now you go, now I understand why that person did what they did to me. It's not me. It's not about me. I haven't done anything wrong. I didn't entice this person. I didn't set it up. I didn't go, make it easy on this person to victimize me. It's not me. And so you take that part of it also out of the equation.
Yeah, you take the control away. Unfortunately, with sexual abuse, it happens at varying levels. I, as a child, thank God, God's merciful, was able to break away from those situations before anything terribly bad happened. But nonetheless, it was still traumatic. To a little girl, it was still traumatic, and it was wrong. And I knew in my heart that it was wrong. But a lot of times, these people that are more severely damaged, unless there is intervention by a caring, loving family and the spiritual aspect. That's why I say, don't be so quick to pull away from your churches and your religious leaders and advisors, because not all of them are like that. And a lot of them have a lot of wisdom that they can share with you about God's forgiveness so that you can rise above these circumstances. They're the ones that will pray with you and encourage you and show you through God's word what it is that you can do to live a productive and fruitful life after something tragic happening like that. But because it tends to be cyclical, you have to look at the phrase, there but for the grace of God go I, because you could be that monster if that happened at a level and at a degree. You could turn in to be just like that person. But somewhere along the line, God intervened. And you say, where was he then? Well, you know what? I've learned in the course of my lifetime that because sin is in the world, we have to contend with it. And we have to contend for our faith. And sometimes sin forces us in a position where we have to experience some really horrific things. But God brings us through it, and we're stronger because of it. We're wiser. And we are in a better position to help those coming after us that are going to be brought in our path of life, to be able to help them through a similar circumstance so that they don't become those monsters. So forgiveness, again, it's not the kumbaya forgiveness that, we have to make everything back to being pretty and normal. No. That's not what real forgiveness is. It's a willingness to be able to look honestly at your situation, assess it. God says, come, let us reason together. Though your sins be like scarlet, I will wash you with hyssop and you will be whiter than snow. And if he's willing to do that for us, and we're willing to lay down our so-called right to be angry at this person and say, you know what? I don't like what happened. I've been hurt by it. It's caused the destruction of my ability to have healthy relationships. I can't seem to hold it together. I can't hold my family together. I can't hold my marriage together because of all that happened to me. How can you help me? Well, when we submit ourselves to the highest of authorities, God himself, and say, I don't have it within myself to be able to forgive this individual, but I want to do what you call me to do above what I know I'm doing right now. I hate them. Father, I hate them. I hate them for what they did. I want to kill them. And he's like, I know. But I don't.
It's that peace that's beyond any understanding. When you turn to Jesus Christ, when you have the Holy Spirit, you have that ability to gain that peace that outside of the Holy Spirit, outside of the experience of Jesus Christ, the relationship with Jesus Christ, outside of that, you cannot understand, you cannot appreciate the peace that you realize that is beyond all understanding. It is a supernatural peace that you are given that then gives you that ability through Christ to forgive.
Yeah, I don't think that I think in a sense, forgiveness sometimes is a gift from the Holy Spirit.
Sure it is.
We just don't have it within ourselves and in our nature to be able to, in our natural self, be able to do that. So it requires us seeking that power outside of ourselves that can come only from God himself.
And it's real power, and it is tangible.
Well, here's the thing that you can be absolutely sure on. Every individual who has ever experienced sexual abuse, when they come into their relationship with God, and people come into a relationship with God in many, many different ways. I've come to the conclusion there is no set pattern. You're going to have an experience with God, and it's going to change your life.
Yep.
And it can happen in many, many different ways.
And they are all unique experiences.
But when that happens, and you truly hand yourself over to him and to his care and trust, that's the other thing. When you hold hatred or unforgiveness in your heart, you're not able to trust. It's like this cement wall that goes up in your life. You can't trust people.
Yep.
You won't trust people. And that, in a sense, cuts you off. That wall that you put up also separates you from the ones that you love. And that's why we're seeing all of this divorce and, marriages falling apart and people thinking that the grass is greener on the other side. I know.
Yep.
So, we need to be able to allow God, and I truly believe that only the Holy Spirit can move on an individual's heart. I don't care what religion you are. You believe in God. He's got a spirit about him, and it's holy. And when that
powerful.
Holy Spirit is asked to come in, remember what Jesus did on the cross with that thief, within the last breaths of life, said to him, "Would you remember me when you come into your kingdom?" The most powerful words, I think, recorded in Scripture are when Jesus said, "I tell you this day you will be with me in paradise." Because all he did, he obviously probably had never been in a church or a temple in his entire life. He was a thief,
Yeah.
But there was this personal religion, quote unquote, if you want to call it that. There was that moment of revelation when he said, this is not just an ordinary individual. This is somebody special. He is a king, and he saw that inner strength in him, in addition to seeing the elements around him drastically changing, which is what we're seeing right now.
And that's the strength that we can tap into through our relationship with Jesus Christ. We're going to wrap up the show, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this really private and intimate conversation with Kathleen. And Kev, I'm going to toss this back over to you, but I just want people also to know that they can go to anthonypatch.com. That's a little bit easier name to spell, anthonypatch.com. And Kathleen's book is on my homepage, and you can link and you can obtain a autographed copy that Kathleen will obviously sign, and she will personally mail out to you. And today is the first day that the book is available. Kev, thank you very much for being with us this evening. And, we are a family. You said that before the show to us, Kev, and we are a family. And I thank you for being in our family, Kev.
Through thick and thin, brother. And what a brilliant show that was. And I want to thank Kathleen personally for opening up and sharing the backstory behind Pigtails and Potter's Field. Now, if you want to get a signed copy, head to Kathleen's website at kurquhart.com. I'll put that link in the description, but it's kurquhart.com. Or alternatively, head on over to anthonypatch.com, and you'll only be able to see and hear this show exclusively on the Anthony Patch channel.